Throughout history in the NBA, we have seen players come and go, and some have had more interesting career opportunities after they had left the NBA. Today, we're going to talk about a former top 2 overall pick in the 2003 NBA draft who would go from one of the biggest busts in NBA history to a kickboxing ring after retiring, amongst many other things. The 2003 NBA draft will go down as one of the best drafts of all time, with multiple Hall of Famers going in the first round. In the first 5 picks, we saw 4 current or future Hall of Famers. With the first overall pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers would draft a franchise-defining player in LeBron James, who would later lead them to a championship and hold most of their records all time. We all know how his story has gone. With the third overall pick, the Denver Nuggets would draft LeBron's high school rival in Carmelo Anthony. A future Hall of Famer, Anthony would bounce around a few teams during his career, but would end up as a 10-time All-Star, top 10 in scoring all time, and would make the NBA 75th anniversary team. Next, with the 4th overall pick, the Toronto Raptors would take Chris Bosh. Bosh would end up as a 2-time champion, 11-time All-Star, and a Hall of Famer. And finally, with the 5th pick, the Miami Heat would take the man who would single-handedly change franchise history and become the best player to ever put on a Heat jersey. 13-time All-Star, 3-time champion, and Finals MVP, Dwayne Wade was certainly worth the pick. So with that being said, 4 Hall of Famers in the first 5 picks, who was the odd man out? Who was drafted with the 2nd overall pick? The Detroit Pistons had owned the 2nd overall pick due to a trade 5 years before in 1997. The Grizzlies would trade for Otis Thorpe from the Pistons for a 1st round pick. The first pick would be determined by a coin flip, and the Cavs, as we know, would win. Since the Grizzlies didn't get the first pick, they would end up losing it in a trade to the Pistons, where 5 years before, they would have never imagined that it would end up being the 2nd overall pick. The Pistons just came off of a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals and now had a chance to draft 2nd overall in a generational draft. With this pick, the Pistons would draft Darko Milicic, who I would argue could be the biggest bust of all time, as they would have had a guaranteed Hall of Fame talent within the next 3 picks after him. Milicic was drafted as the youngest foreign player of all time. The Serbian played professional basketball there from the age of 14 until he was drafted and went to America to play for the Pistons. The Pistons, as we know, were already a contending team, and with the addition of a 2nd overall pick, they were expected to be a title contender in the upcoming season, and that they were, making it all the way to the finals and beating the Lakers in 5 games. Despite the championship win and Milicic becoming the youngest player to win a championship, it wouldn't be because of him. During his rookie season, he would not start a single game and only average 4.7 minutes and 1.4 points per game. Milicic was basically 4th in the depth chart at the center position and was buried in the roster, leading to not getting playing time. His next season and a half in Detroit wouldn't go much better, as he would not average more than 2 points a game and would only start 2 games in his whole time in Detroit. A number 2 overall pick in that draft, definitely not panning out for the Pistons, despite their success though, as they would continue to make the finals and Eastern Conference Finals through his time there. Milicic would then get traded to Orlando, where he would see a good amount more playing time and more points per game. Over his 2 seasons there, he would average 7.6 points per game in his first season and 8 points per game in his second season, a very big jump from before, where he was only averaging 1.4 points per game. His development in Orlando made his upcoming free agency more enticing, as he was still young, and at 22 years old, he would enter free agency looking for an opportunity to prove that he could really pan out to be that number 2 selection from a few years before. And with this continued jump and growth, it seems like maybe a team would be willing to take a risk on him, as like I said, he was drafted as the youngest player of all time coming from a foreign country at only 18 years old. So a few years into his career at 22 years old, there were a lot of teams that were trying to get him on a contract. He would end up signing with the Memphis Grizzlies, where he would play the most amount of games in his career, starting 79 out of the 131 games he was there, with a massive rise in playing time. In his first season there, he would average 24 minutes per game, but would struggle from the field, shooting only 44%. In his next season, he would be sent to the bench more often, as he only started 15 of the 61 games. It seemed like his career would end up hitting a tough spot, as he was good enough to play, but not good enough to become a bona fide starter. After leaving Memphis, Memphis, he would end up in New York, Minnesota, and end his career in Boston. After only playing one game in Boston in the 2012-2013 season, he would announce his retirement. Not the career you would have expected from a number 2 overall pick, but he still played 10 seasons in the NBA at the end of the day. A big question after his retirement would be how much the Pistons would have changed as a franchise if they had drafted one of the next 3 picks in Wade, Anthony, or Bosh. Despite retiring from the game he loved, his post-retirement plans would end up being more interesting than his NBA career was. So just about a year and a half after retiring from the NBA, we didn't hear much from Milicic, but he would end up coming back in 2014 as he would announce that he was going to pursue a kickboxing career. A very interesting choice. At 7 feet tall though, a lot of people were interested in this. A 7-foot tall kickboxer, a guy that was one of the biggest busts in NBA history, decided to go out and join the Waco League in his hometown of Novi Sad. He would end up losing this fight on December 18th, 2014 from a TKO in the second round, and he would never go back and try to become a kickboxer after this. The fight itself, a lot of people semi-interested in this. Obviously, we have a lot of these celebrity boxers as of now, but when this happened during the time, it was pretty hyped up, but overall, he did end up losing this fight as he would have a very bad injury in the second round where he would have to call off the fight. But after that, he would stop pursuing his MMA career as it was just a one-and-done experience for him after that loss. After his retirement from the kickboxing area, he would go and try to return to play basketball in the Basketball League of Serbia in 2015, though he wouldn't play very long as he would come out in 2015, and he said he was going to come back out of retirement and start playing basketball when the season was over, but he changed his mind and did not end up playing there as well. After that, it was a few more years before we heard from him as he was still staying in his native land of Serbia, and in August of 2017, we found out that he owned and operated an apple orchard of 125 acres, and apparently he was this massive farmer too as well. 2 years later after that, we would find out that he came out and would be an amateur basketball player at this point, and it seemed like he still had a love for the game playing, but would not go back and play professionally at all. And in the end, a very interesting career as he would go from one of the biggest busts of all time in NBA history, being drafted before guys like Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade, and then end up going into the kickboxing area, obviously losing that fight, and then finding out that he was a big farmer. So, a very interesting guy, a lot of different levels to this guy, but like I said, arguably one of the biggest busts in NBA history, and my main point that I kind of want to put across to you guys, if you guys don't know about this, just think about how different that Detroit Pistons team could have been if they drafted one of those guys after. Could have been arguably one of the best dynasties in NBA history if we really think about it, because Detroit was in the finals. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals at least within the next 3-4 years. So it would have been very interesting to see how this team would have changed if they didn't go with him. But in the end, that's what makes the NBA interesting. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. Let me know down below who you guys want to see me cover next, and comment. Let me know who you want to see. And I hope you guys like these videos too. Coming back with more of these videos, these story time videos. So with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.